At this point, we just need to set up the rest of this animator. This can be very tedious, but this is the best way to do it. So what we're going to do is set a transition from walk to run, select it, uncheck has exit time, minimize the transition window, minimize the overlap. And we're going to set a condition, and that is that charging is equal to true. Then we're going to do the same thing for idle. We will make a transition, and the transition will have no exit time with minimal overlap and set to run, or minimize the overlap and minimize the transition duration, set the condition that charging is equal to true. And then the transitions back from run. We're going to have the transition, which I will select, no exit time, minimize the transition duration, minimize overlap. This will be charging is equal to false, and walking is true. Because if we're no longer charging, but we are walking, we want to go back this way. And to go back to idle, we want to make sure that if we are no longer charging, but also no longer walking, then we go back to idle. So let's make sure that we have fully finished this. So this transition has no exit time, minimal overlap, and minimal duration. And going back, run to idle, no exit time, minimize duration, minimize overlap. Good. This is going to be our initial starting point. And let's handle the jumping where we take off and land and fly. So I'm going to do a transition from idle to takeoff. I'll select it. We'll make this instant. Uncheck, minimize, minimize, transition. This will be the jump trigger. And any of these walking, running, or idles will be able to transition based on the jump trigger. So let's create that again. I will transition from run to takeoff, uncheck, minimize, minimize, add condition, jump. For walking, right click, make transition to takeoff, uncheck, minimize, minimize, add condition, jump. Now, from any one of the spots we could potentially be in when we are able to jump, when we're on the ground, idle, walking, or running, we can now start to jump with a takeoff. Now what we want to do is have a transition from our takeoff to either fly gliding or landing. What we're going to do is if we are in the middle of jumping and somehow we touch the ground, then the grounded value will be set to true. So we'll have that transition pretty instantaneously as well. Likewise, if you are flying, then this is going to happen fairly instantaneously. And we're going to have this set to only happen when gliding is set to false. Now, what this has is there's two situations that could happen where, either grounded needs to be true or flying needs to be true. But this leaves us in a lurch where we could potentially get stuck. So we're going to add a second transition by right-clicking on takeoff, making the transition to land again, and that creates this triple arrow, meaning there's two potential transitions out of here. The first one involves grounded equaling true, but the second one is when takeoff just gets to the end. So there's no condition, but this time we can set has exit time, meaning as soon as the animation gets towards the end of the takeoff, which can be construed as the beginning of the jumping animation, then it will just start to transition to the landing animation. From here, we can make the land go back to idle, and this will happen if grounded is equal to true. Let's uncheck the has exit time, minimize, minimize. Likewise for fly guide, if this is going back, that means we've been gliding and we just glided right into the ground. So you'll end up at idle. So let's make sure we set that transition to grounded, being true. We'll make this an instant transition. And we will be able to switch from fly gliding to land in a specific situation. And that is when you have pressed the button to no longer glide, and then you want to turn into a fall state for going to idle. So we will make the transition, and we'll leave a little bit of a transition here and have the has exit time so that you can finish your gliding animation. But this will happen when gliding is equal to false. So the last animation that we want, because this has completed our Myro controller animation cycle, is in the event that you die. You can die from any of these states. So let's right click on any state and make a transition, select it, minimize our transition, no exit time, and the condition is you have died. This will be set by the animator. So now we have a complete animator ready to be used on our character. Let's assign it. I will select purple, which has the original Terrorbringer control, but we don't want to use that. So we'll go back to our Myro prefab folder, find the Myro animator controller, and assign it. And now when we hit play, you can see our wonderful dragon sitting over there waiting for us to take control.